Israel could significantly shift its resources from the south to the north. Also, it was able to cut its defense expenditure and focus on increasing its economy. This becomes undermined by the peace treaty not being intact. And even though there hasn't been a warm peace between Israel and the Egyptians, it still enabled Israel to divert its attention and focus on the north, Lebanon and Syria. Every time there's been a war, a regional war, including Egypt, for Israel this has been an existential threat. And because Egypt is the main regional player, other conflicts that Israel has engaged in, for example, Lebanon, that's not been existential. Of course, it's affected Israel's security, but it's not been an existential threat like the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War of 1967 and 72, respectively. I think the UK has taken a more simplistic approach than the US has. The UK has been focusing, it's simply said, let the people's voice be heard, as William Hague said. This is super simplistic. The United States doesn't have a coherent policy, and it's attempted to straddle both sides in its hedge betting. On one hand, it sought to engage in dialogue with the Mubarak regime. On the other hand, it said that Mubarak should listen to its protesters. There's no telling that the United States has wholeheartedly embraced the protesters. Stability entails that a major regional player gives the United States access to the Suez, and it has a peace dividend with Israel. On the other hand, it's not tenable. However, even though it's not tenable, who's going to fill that void? It's going to be the Muslim Brotherhood. There's no evidence that el-Baradei and his opposition and his secular opposition has a strong enough following, because the Muslim Brotherhood have been the party that have been set up by the Mubarak regime as the only alternative, and at the same time they focused on creating civil society, creating infrastructure, just like what Hezbollah has done in Lebanon and Hamas has done in Gaza. They've not simply been a resistance force, and terrorist organizations. They've also been, and they don't simply have a radical doctrine underpinning it. With Sayyid Qutb, they have created a whole welfare system. So they've set themselves up as the only viable alternatives. So actually, the Muslim Brotherhood has the luxury of not fomenting protests. They just have to bide their time, which is what they've been doing in Egypt, and it's also what they've been doing in Jordan as well. They've been biding their time because they have been creating the civil infrastructure there. And stability entails continuum. If there is no continuum in Egypt between the Israelis on one hand and the Egyptian government on the other, then the peace process will fall through. There is no evidence to suggest that the Muslim Brotherhood, that seems to be the most likely winner of the whole scenario, would maintain the peace process.